like the fourth thing is like I want you to be able to behold something that you can only can only be held in the dark. Like you can't you can't read it in a book. In a collective sense, there's not a lot of comfort with moving the heart out of the inspiring space.
Claiming forness totally unconsciously is not only sort of acknowledging that unseen heart and the hurt, but it's also going even further and making it into beautiful composition.
The big hormone enneagram.
I'm John Lekovich, 415, Sexual Self-Pres, 458 Trifix.
I'm David Gray, Self-Pres Sexual, 9 with 1 wing, 974 Trifix.
What up, it's Emeka. I'm an 8 wing 7, Sexual Self-Pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Alexandra. I'm a Social Self-Preservation 9 wing 1, 963 Trifix.
Like and subscribe on Apple and Spotify, and leave us a review. If you want to support the show with a donation, you can find us on Venmo at Big Hormone and paypal.me/Big Hormone.
Last episode we did was pretty good. I hardly remember anything from doing it.
That's how you know it's a good one. It was just flow. It was
just flow.
Just
and then I was like, damn, that's good.
I saw people talking about it, and I was like, whoa, I blacked out during the whole thing, apparently. I don't remember anything I said. So I listened to it today. I was like, wow, that was nice.
Yeah.
It was a good one. On frustration, especially in the Heart Center, like 4 stuff versus 2 and 3, and just kind of contrasting personalness, sort of in response to the Josh Lewis episode.
So I want to hear your impressions from the Josh Lewis, because stuff you were saying about the personal subjectivity of 4, I think that's really interesting. And then I don't think we've talked about the shame of 4. Well, maybe that conversation brings something up around shame, but that'd be interesting. We've been doing Trifix typing updates, and it's kind of like there's a lot. Like by and large, most people are 3-wing 2 fixed.
Yeah, Joseph said that
like
you guys
50.
were up to
it's
47.
It's dozens
now?
and dozens.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like
wow.
It's been really interesting to see how like personable 3-wing 2 is. Like how regardless of whatever it is, people will just start their video on it. They'll flash a smile. Like it's really, as the wing of a fix, that it makes that much of a difference. The 3, like 4 anything is just like not giving. Like, hey.
Well, what do you want?
I mean, that's like, talking about image, like the image you're projecting, the image 4s project, at least on the onset, like if is I'm not available to you.
Yeah.
That's what they're showing off, is how unavailable I am. It's like, you're not getting me. And I don't just mean comprehending me, but you're not actually receiving me. And that's like, if you can hang with the off-puttingness or that inaccessibleness, then I can relax. But that's like that's what the 4's projecting, instead of like how valuable I am or something.
Whereas the 2, like even as a wing, is like wide open host to everyone's invited. Kind of. Yeah. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but
it's like the 2 things, like almost wanting to be available to offer you something. So there's an openness to I'm here with you. That's right. And 2 fix is really obvious with that kind of stuff, but it's really interesting that it's really popping so loudly with 3 at the last fix, even if it's 3-wing 2, that you can really see that difference, that they're really trying to be interpersonal. Like it's interpersonal openness from the onset.
Yep. And we were speaking about some people got upset at our contrasting 3-wing 2, 3-wing 4, and 4 and 2, and all this stuff. And on one hand, we're critiquing it from a 4 fix point of view, like because the majority of the population is 3-wing 2 fixed,
right?
So it's going to come across as negative because we're making certain contrasts. But like, I love 3-wing 2s that I know. It's just like. It's just like if you see an overabundance of any particular type, then it's going to create like collective whatevers that you have to whatever against. Yeah, and it also means that there is a certain default understoodness about whatever, even if it's not well understood, it's still like, yeah, we're trying to like what the heart is about from a 3 wing 2 perspective is about actualizing myself and about connecting and lifting us all up. And that's like the collective's baseline relationship to their image and to their to what the heart is doing.
Yeah.
And so like we're not trying to be negative about 3 wing 2 or 2s or anything like that. It's just like there are certain like basically what we're saying is that there's things that are lost in every type.
Yeah.
There's things that are lost, period. And that, because there is a overabundance of certain types, there is not as much need to like we'll get into another episode to like what 4 wing 5 is missing, right? And how they're suffering, but it's like we don't need to address it on such like a consistent large scale because it's not so all over the place.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's not like they're exempt, but it's just like we're talking about how people are generally speaking, and there's like a whole, I don't know, world we're relating to. It's like all of the like all of us are like, oh, this is how people are.
Yeah.
This is what's being lost in the collective,
So it's like the same reaction people had when we did our series on attachment types a few years ago, where we're realizing how prevalent attachment is and sort of the assumptions of attachment, uncovering that. And we're reacting to that because we're reacting to our experiences with the majority of people. It's like, oh, this is the way the world works. And so it's not like we're trying to trash 3 wing 2. Most people we know are 3 wing 2 fixed. But it's just to recognize, oh, this is the social or heart center default for the world.
Yeah.
Just that sexual blind is the instinctual default for the world. And I think I mentioned earlier, like frustration or low frustration, at least the way the world functions, is minimizing the pain of frustration and with rejection and attachment. And so I think it's really helpful because understanding that most people are 3 wing 2 fixes gives you a lot of insight into the assumptions, the social assumptions. So not just like us being social blind, there is like a 3 wing 2 milieu that the 4 fixers or the 4 wingers in the heart space would be reacting to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, maybe this is saying the same thing, but like another angle is that because we all have a 4 influence in the heart center, we're reacting from our heart center.
Yes.
Right. So like we're reacting from our own bias, and like we all know the discourse out there from the 3 wing 2 perspective on the 4, that came up in the episode between Josh and Lewis, that Josh can be frustrated by the like lack of faith and trust and hope that the 4 influence has. And so that's, we're just speaking from that side.
Yeah. And it's not to say that one is better or worse. It's just 2 different sides of, same coin. It's just, all right, this is how you might run into some issues if you have 3 wing 2 fixed with someone who has 4 influence. This is how you might misunderstand each other.
And like me understanding an attachment heart and a rejection heart is like, I've suffered from not integrating those things. There's things I can learn from those. I'm like, part of what's been interesting especially after Josh's developmental view of the centers kind of opening things up, is what we did in this last episode, which was seeing what frustration, like what's the positive part of frustration for the other 2. And we've explored what's the positive part of rejection and a positive part of attachment. And anyway, so I can understand why people think we're just shitting on them, but this contrast is like bringing forward certain, bring things into view in a certain way.
I think some people have taken the episode to suggest that we're saying that people who are 3 wing 2 fixed aren't aesthetic, and that's not what we were saying. Right. It's people have aesthetic preferences, and some of the most interesting, beautiful collages we've seen, we had typed 3 wing 4 fixed for that reason. I think we had to look a little deeper, or not for that, just for that reason. But that was a bias that we had before, that recognizing it's sure you have your aesthetic preferences, but it's for the purpose of pulling people in interpersonally, or there's a certain seductive nature with any 2 influence interpersonally that isn't there with 4. or like you're not willing to sacrifice the potential for connection for that aesthetic preference. Whereas the 4 influenced person in the heart space isn't leading for, they're not trying to be available, not trying to be available for connection.
Right, and what we talked about in the chat, you and I, was for 4, preferences aren't just I like my preferences. They're kind of seen as there's the outer me and the inner me, and 4 is always trying to make the outer me match the inner me. As that's where the authenticity that gets associated with 4 is referring to is I need to be kind of listening to the spring that is my identity and representing it with as closely as possible in my outer life.
Yes.
And so preferences are seen as like little wormholes or little, I'm bringing things into my awareness and having different reactions to them, positively or negatively or whatever. And those evocations are giving me information about who and what I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why the like preferences have a special role for 4, and why they could be so stubbornly defensive and living around their preferences, because the preferences are seen as kind of like gold or something.
And it's self-augmenting. You know what I mean? Reactivity and frustration is like wanting to keep saying, no, that's not me. No, that's shit. No, that's not quite it. You know what I mean? It wants to keep chewing on you're not quite getting it right, or your taste isn't right, or whatever, right? So it's not, well, it's not fair or whatever. It doesn't have, it's partly in some ways a disconnection from, well, just the opposite, the 3-wing 2 space of the invitation for the wide open, to spread open the gates to humanity and everybody's allowed in. It's kind of like wanting to hyper parse everything and chew on the bitchiness, sort of.
Well, I think we talked about it in that class that we did on, is it Bishkinsky?
Oh,
the painter.
Beksinski.
Yeah.
Beksinski, yeah.
So he was doing this 4-fix thing where they try to like ask him if his paintings meant this, and I realized part of what's happening for 4 is that when you do art, you're trying to capture this really subjective, personal, ephemeral thing that's hard to grasp, and you're trying to convey it through this art, and then journalists come in and ask you questions like, so what does this mean? And it feels like, well, if he said if it was the best way for me to convey what I was trying to do was through words, then I would be able to explain it to you. Like the art itself is a representation of what I was trying to, what was coming up for me. And it feels like whenever people are like, well, is this? Because to try to categorize it cheapens it. And that's why I think where the frustration is coming from is like, you can't, the point is that this is a very mysterious, hidden, difficult part of me, special part of me that isn't easily defined. And if it was easily defined, then it wouldn't be special. And so when you say, well, are this kind of person? Or he's like, no, it's not. It's more complex than that.
Well, obviously. That's my point, is that there's endless fuel to say, if the person's trying to explain it, or, okay, well, if it's not that, well, is it this? Then there's kind of an endless fuel for, no, you're not quite getting it right. You know what I mean? It just doesn't.
How could they get it right? It's too personal.
Right. In the last, all right. So like 2 is having this kind of like the god of love, right? The goddess of love.
Sure.
Like it's just the force of love in the universe.
Yes.
And it does have this quality where it can leave its own preferences. It doesn't mean that 2 energy and 3-wing 2 energy doesn't have preferences, but they can leave their preferences. But but there's a certain way in which, as you're speaking to with like, oh, talk about your painting in words. Like words are these universal mediums where I have some sense of what a word means that you share, and some, in order to speak the same language. But like the 4th thing is like, I want you to be able to behold something that you can only be held in the dark. Like you can't put it, you can't read it in a book. You can't put it in like that's part of why the Enneagram fucked me up, was reading my personality type and being like, I'm a lot of this, like I'm a lot of things in a book in words. And like, if you like look at a painting, it's kind of like looking at something in the dark, like, and it stays in the realm where you can only adjust your eyes to the dark. You can't, like, having your eyes in the day world is a different thing. And so it's like, if you think of the three is like that kind of linchpin between what is actualized in the day world and then actualized in the night world or something. It's like, I'm inviting you to come under the horizon a bit.
Yes.
Which means it doesn't lend to something that could be put in text.
Right.
And a lot of, speaking of this like collective 3-wing 2 fix, like, all right, so 3 in energy in general has a lot of shame, right? I mean, all 3 heart types do, but like, it has a lot of shame about what you discover in the dark about who I am, right? Like,
interesting.
Like, what if I'm not what I'm upholding? What if I'm actually a failure? What if I'm not, like, you're supposed to see me as inspiring, and what if I'm not inspiring? Well, actually, and then, that's the 4 realm. Is like, I'm not inspiring. Like, I'm dirt, right? And so, a lot of time, like, in a collective sense, there's not a lot of comfort with moving the heart out of the inspiring space. And the inspiring space is important. I'm not shitting on it or anything like that, but it's just saying, it's like there's a bias where things need to be communicatable, and heart needs to be a little bit like my heart and your heart have to be a little bit of a universal heart.
Right.
And it's not like your heart and my heart. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I've just been reflecting on what you're just saying, like there's the social or the heart space bias of just availability, and even just running up against that in the way we how we promote ourselves, or the feedback we've gotten about the way people look at Enneagram or our podcast and everything, and is that we're this shrouded, mysterious group doing this magical creative stuff that we aren't communicating properly what it is, and so there's a sense of like, oh, you guys should take yourselves more seriously. I was like, oh, we're taking ourselves very seriously. It's just that we're not doing, not to say maybe there's a way we can do it, but there's a certain communication, like, how does what you're doing fit into the global landscape of all that's out there? And whereas it's this hidden thing, and personal subjectivity or expression of your selfhood, in terms of personal subjectivity, is a mysterious thing. And maybe it's expressed in something we created, and it's like, you get it because you experienced that thing. And you get that personal subjectivity, but to sort of like explain it to you doesn't seem possible. Like, to sort of like put it in a box loses that some sense. It loses something if you do that. That's what feels wrong about trying to do that.
And it's also, I'm big on the idea that each type is a representation of 1/3 of what a body is, what a heart is, and what a mind is.
Yes.
And, like a lot, like working with clients, basically a lot of the work I do with them is getting them to recognize the force, quote unquote, force space that's already in them. Whether they have a 4 fix or not, but it's like recognizing certain dimensions of the heart that are already operating in them that they're just not giving as much attention to. And that are usually actually useful for people coping with not only grief and loss, but also like not being as inspiring or complete or healed or whole as they would want to be. And so the ideal, so the force space, integrating like every individual person, integrating their force space is like, how do I hold the wreckage that is, like the part that is like not for the LinkedIn profile,
right?
like the broken part,
right?
And not as a remorseful, like I'm so broken, I'm sad, but just like we're all fucking like weird messes, and it's like it's actually universal, but it's particular to each person, and that's the particularities what the 4 is putting attention to.
That's a very good point. Yeah. No, maybe that is the social role of 4 for the collective.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think of what we do, like when you put together Trifix with wings and stacking and so forth, as really zeroing in for each person, the client or whomever, the exact components and stylization of your hell. You know what I mean? Yeah, just like really specifying hell. what hell is for you as an individual. And to me, that's like that's well, that gets me high. I mean, that's just fantastic. That's just an amazing thing to have a really clear picture of what your specific hell is. That's just amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's like I mean, that's a really good point. Getting really clear in hell, and like you can't do anything, like you can't move anything unless you recognize you're in hell, and you're avoiding certain things and all that kind of shit. And that's like why the mistyping and all that kind of shit is so important. Is like you're deluded about the hell. You're hiding from your own hell by being mistyped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You said something about more to this aesthetic thing. Let me just read it because
sure.
You said big difference in 2 versus 4 is 4 is trying to make a wormhole to inner self and be in sync with what's arising. So a lot of reactivity is rooted in letting it create rooted in this, putting something in, letting it create a response through which I learn about myself and position. And you said 2 is trying not to wormhole by making sure attention goes towards you so that I don't have to question self. I create self in your eyes. And that struck me as like, it's not that 2 influence doesn't have an aesthetic, but it's the aesthetic is more about enrolling the other's attention. And like, in terms of, this is how I want you to see me. And the 4 expression of it feels like, part of what just feels precious is like, you found some deeper part of you that's not for communicating to other people. This is how I want you to see me. It feels like you unearthed something, way too personal to be communicated.
Yeah, totally. In our conversation that we had yesterday, I was asking, it was funny, there was like rejection stuff, like, so, I was asking you just about like, what's going on in your personal life.
Yeah.
And it was like, and then I listened to the last episode we did, and it referenced, like, you were talking about some rejection stuff at the beginning of the episode.
Right.
And so, like, I would ask you, like, how are you feeling about this? Or how's this going for you? And first you'd say stuff about, well, relationships are like this. You kind of lay out,
I have to get through the rejection stuff to get to the person.
And then I know.
I have to burn through like the wall, basically. Like you asked me about it, and I'm just like, oh God, like I have to. Like I watch myself trying to connect to people, and it feels like there is such a thick wall to get through before I can do the personal.
No, you get there, but it's funny because I don't know, like it was right after talking to you that I listened to it, and you do this thing of like, you don't tell me how something is affecting you or how you feel about it. You tell me like
what it is,
the way things are.
Right.
And what has to happen in this situation. Yeah. Like this is just the law of the universe right here.
Right.
Here it is. And then you start actually getting more personal and whatever.
Right. I noticed this is just one short example, but I'm starting to notice this more and more, but you'll ask a question which seems like a personal penetration, and my first response is to talk about something around it. And hopefully I get to the personal part, but sometimes I don't. I just, I get lost in something else. It always feels like I need to set the scene first. There's this. All right, but it's a wall.
Circling before you go to the bullseye.
Sometimes like Akram would ask me a question, and it would be like, she's like, but you're not answering the question, and because I'm setting up the scene, I'm getting to it, and then I finally, I'm setting it up,
Yeah, I thought that was super funny
but rejection types do that all the time. Like aides do that all the time. If you just watch them talk, it's not 100%. Really.
No, that is like getting clear on that is actually like this is only like an hour ago or something, but it was like, our conversation and then listening to our episode, and I was still listening to it before we started this call, and it was like, fuck, like that makes so much sense with like my parents and just just rejection types is like they definitely set the scene. They do this like this is the reality.
Yes.
And then they can relax into the personal thing. But but then a rejection type that's not feeling comfortable
will never get there. Yeah.
Won't go there. And that like understanding that is like feels like a big revelation for me. Like oh, that's what's fucking going on. Because like, as a forum, like what's going on in your heart right now?
Right.
What's happening now?
Yeah, so it just makes that point about like attachment with rejection as a secondary. it's like the universal, and then the sort of like substrate of existence, or the elements of existence, and you're not in there. Like, the frustration bit is the hyper personal, not just aesthetic, but it's like your own personal subjectivity is frustration, and like like attachment, rejection, where they're just a function of something. Bermuda, but with all the rejection wings. You're just looking at Amazon warehouse, fulfillment warehouse.
That is the most brutal name you guys come up with. That like, I can feel like an organ I didn't know I had, cringing and writhing internally. Something below a kidney and a spleen just going, oh. With Alexander's Trifix, like, being Bermuda, but then she has a 458 or 451, excuse me, overlay.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine 451 is probably the rarest, right?
It's one of the rarest.
It's one of the rarest, because
it's up there.
So Alexander would have the most common and this like backdoor to the antithesis,
right, totally.
which is pretty interesting
for sure.
It explains a lot, because like, listening to some of the last episode, you talked about some of like the impact of getting your frustration mirrored through our relationship, and
you're right.
It is like, from the point of view of like when you're insecure, you get very
existential.
Well, when you're insecure with like, like I've seen you around your certain members of your family, you get really adapting.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
You lose your location.
Yep.
Really pretty intensely.
Yeah.
When you're insecure. And
no,
then
I'm not there anymore. Yeah.
But then once that like fog is or whatever, right behind it is like all your shit. You know what I mean? Like you're very into focus.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always been a really interesting thing in you, is like you can be really diffuse and then really focused, but
hyper
and it's not
specific. 145 is
hyper specific, and it makes her 9, her 3, and her 6 more specific. I'm not trying to say it's going from your trifix to your overlay or something.
I hear you.
But it's really interesting.
This came up at the last zone. I can't remember what night. I think it was the night we were all doing ketamine or something like that. But I was like laying on the floor, just kind of like in the middle of the floor, just like laying under a blanket. And I remember we were all just kind of sharing reflections. And one of the ways that I experienced my overlay is that like the atmospheres and people and tones and, just holding environments or whatever, that the like places I don't feel a need to adapt in basically don't exist. They're like very extremely far and few between. So when I do find like, in like the zone was one of those spaces where I'm just like, wow, I'm like not needing to adapt at all. I'm not needing to adjust here, maybe in like certain areas or certain like moment to moment kind of things. But anyway, that's kind of how I see mine, is like my overlay is I'm still a Bermuda, so I still can stretch and I still can shapeshift and I can still do all of these things, but like it's insincere most of the time. It's just for like my own comfort or for your regulation or something like that most of the time. Very rarely is my adaptability do I get to use it for like my own pleasure or something like that. I don't know what that means.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it's been really surprising just looking at how those secondary influences, I guess, just it's highlighting how different frustration is from rejection, and it's almost like very different ways of adapting for Bermuda if you have that as a secondary influence. And even just like thinking about how, as a rejection type, how I think you said something, John, about like some similarities between attachment and rejection in terms of certain different ways of doing blankness. And, like attachment might lose themselves in the sauce of the swirl of what's happening, whereas rejection is sort of like representing some elemental thing about like the laws of the universe. And in between those two, they're where are you? And it just feels like frustration is just like this, like, all right, I'm gonna like my personal time for my hyper personal subjectivity to show up, my dreams, my ideals. And even if you're have a lot of frustration, it does feel like it's a really difficult thing to represent in this world. It's a really risky, vulnerable, and in a personality to really lead with that is a very open wound, seemingly.
Right. Well, I mean, so if underneath the object relations is primarily frustration, right? Is being an infant that didn't get your needs met some way or didn't get attuned to. And so, you know, even the frustration affect of the object relations is not quite touching into the primitive frustration that we're referring to, but there's something still there. Anyway, you know, it goes to your point about like, you know, we didn't give it enough space in the last pod episode, but like, you know, you said something about like dreams or to have a dream is to like break your heart or something.
Yeah, it's like, painful to have a dream.
It's so painful, and to have your own dream, you know, and to not just like, you know, try to fulfill the dreams of like your family's expectations or, you know, what your social milieu values. It's like to just have your own thing is like to risk not having it and then to suffer immensely. And yeah, it's like that point was really fucking crucial. Is like how much there's a like collective defense against what I really want, basically.
Yeah. No, that's something that struck me recently, just thinking about like, you know, what is it about people that grow up identifying with wanting to work with certain companies and identifying with certain brands? It's like it feels like we're all afraid of just being without. You know, you want to be taken care of, and it feels like, well, what do I have to do to get my needs met? And you just sort of disown your own preferences to a certain degree. It's like, well, what do I need to do to get along with this person? What do I need to do to get in with this, you know, work at this company? And so just watching people do typing videos, and it just feels like, wow, you haven't really sat down and really considered yourself deeply, and what you have dreams, you have aesthetic preferences, and they're just in a back burner. Like, you know, the sexual instinct, you have it, but there's a certain time and place where you get to indulge that part of yourself, if ever. It's not really integrated in your day-to-day experiences. So like having someone answer questions about what is your ideal place that you'd like to live, and what are some of these things, like you can see that people are really moved by that and really excited to talk about themselves. It's like, it's obvious that you've been doing this is what I need to do to get my needs met thing for so long that you forget yourself. You forget that you could have a life. Maybe people are like, oh, when I retire, then I'll go do the things that I want to do. If you make it there.
Right. Sorry.
Well, this is the rationalization for all of my decadence and self-indulgence is my frustration.
It's a protest.
Yeah, is you know, I'm dealing with a lot as a big dreamer. You know what I mean?
God.
Let's have sympathy for David. Let's start a fund for
David.
Oh yeah, please start a fund. My God, we should have done that a long time
the bereaved. The bereaved. 974.
Hell yeah. Come on.
So much frustration he's suffering under.
It's brutal. You guys wouldn't understand, really.
Yeah, poor David. Pray for David.
Please.
Pray for David. Yeah, thoughts and prayers.
Thank you.
Thoughts for prayer.
David Grayer.
I'll take your two-ness, your two-ish prayers.
I also think that we just haven't talked about shame. I think we hit it on the shame pod a little bit, but it just feels like something that people don't fully understand yet.
No, totally. You know, Josh and I have been recording an intro course for the Enneagram school, and a lot of Enneagram people try to rename shame to be grief or something like sadness or something like that. And it's kind of fundamentally misunderstanding the role shame plays in the personality. You know, it's like we're all fearful that our identity is somehow unreal or fraudulent or inadequate. And, you know, it goes back to a very fucking early period of life when your sense of self was just threadbare. You know, there was like just nothing there already. So when your parents did not attune to you properly, it was taken as this vote on how abandonable and nothing you are. And so that the role of shame is like anxiety you can tolerate to a certain degree. It's hard, and rage you can tolerate to a certain degree. But I think shame is the most difficult for people to tolerate because it calls into into question their whole selfhood,
their value.
And so, sorry,
it's the heart of the matter, right?
It's the heart of the matter.
Your value,
because it's like, again, with whatever center you're dominant in, right? Heart, body, or heart, or mind, you're trying to resolve something there, and that is like the focus of your sense of like your experience is in there. But there is something about the heart center and identity and how you uphold a sense of self that is like so vulnerable. It's vulnerable and like feels liable to be destroyed, I think, more than rage and anxiety, like even anxiety. There's something like, I'm going to be destroyed and violated on an identity level that I think people, given the collective bias in the heart center, people don't realize how much they are like allowing their identities to be violated constantly, and just not like feeling and integrating the impact of that stuff, because there's a collective image or way of regarding the heart that is about what is inspirational and uplifting and empowering about me. And so like people will take even stuff that is horrific that they're putting themselves through as empowerment.
Oh, it just made me think that the whole not a four thing, the initial impulse that people have when they come into the Enneagram to see themselves as core 4 is speaking to this collective blind spot for the heart center, and also collective blind spot for the personal ideal of the frustration. And so it's like when you find this, like you find this personality system that is about like uncovering this deep dark part of you, it feels natural to assume that, I am this type who is has this real hidden identity, because that's what they're experiencing for the first time. Is they're experiencing themselves like, I've disowned this hidden real authentic identity, and this is helping me discover that. And so it makes sense that people would just start off that journey thinking that that's the type that they have.
And the other thing too is that I think's happening there is that 4 is largely unconsciously representing, making actual beauty, art, and high excellence or poetry out of that thing that is that part that hasn't been seen. It represents that, like, so it's, in other words, it's sort of like it's a doubling down or a leveraging even, the act of claiming forness totally unconsciously is not only sort of acknowledging that unseen heart and the hurt, but it's also going even further and making it into having the magic power to make beautiful composition from that pain or something.
Interesting.
Yeah. The thing that can be, I think, confusing is a lot of people identify with being artistic and being aesthetic, and that being a value that they have. And I think there needs to be more of a distinction for what, I guess that's what we're doing, like what it represents for frustration. And like what you said, John, like it's an expression of personal selfhood, like the artistry of 4, at least as it pertains to in the heart space, is about the art is supposed to try to capture something deep and personal and hidden that couldn't be captured any other way. Not just like I really like art, or I really like beauty. The beauty is meant to be like a glimpse into something that is so personal and deep that is unique, and like a personalization that's hidden. And so it's that's something I feel like it gets confusing for people. It's like, well, lots of people like love beauty and appreciate beauty. Even 3-wing 2 fixtures, or like they identify with that. But what does that mean? And
like some incredible artists are there's a lot that are 9-wing 1s with 3-wing 2 fix.
Sure.
Like incredible artists and better than me and all this kind of stuff. Like in very you know, and it's like, but it's just, I'd be curious to have like Kristen or somebody who's a 9-wing-1, 3-wing 2 talk about her art and the role it plays,
right?
You know, and that kind of thing. But yeah, like when I was in college, I read an essay by George Bataille, and I've tried to find it. I think it was by George Bataille, but I can't. But it's about Orpheus, and like, you know, on my like Instagram and stuff, Orpheus and email and all that kind of shit. And the myth of Orpheus it's an essay on the myth of Orpheus by George Bataille, and in the myth of Orpheus, it's like Orpheus is this archetypal artist, and he plays the lyre, and you know, it's like when he plays, it's like the sun rises and sets, and the rhythms of nature happen, and his girlfriend Eurydice is bitten by a serpent, and she dies, and Orpheus is super depressed, and so he figures out or decides that I'm going to go to Hades and get her soul and bring her back up, and I'm going to use my artistry to charm the lords of hell into getting her back. And so he goes down there, he talks to Hades and Persephone, and he plays for them, and they're like, wow, you're so fucking good. All right, fine. You can take Eurydice if you walk out of the underworld, but you don't look back and don't look at her. You know, like if you look at her while you're walking, you just have to trust she's back there. And if you look at her, she's going to go right back to the underworld. So he's like, okay. So he makes this long journey out of the underworld, and he can't look back. He's anxious if she's even there. He doesn't know. He gets to the surface world. He looks back, and she has not yet left the cave. You know, she's not yet in the surface yet. And so he gets a glimpse of her before she gets drawn back into the underworld and lost forever. And so the essay, the Bataille essay, was speaking on how Orpheus is the archetypal artist who gets a glimpse of the underworld and represents it in something that is made of form, right? Like you're making an Apollonian form in art. You know, like it has to sound right. The colors have to look right and resonate.
Apollonian from the Dionysian.
It's like a little taste of the Dionysian through the Apollonian.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. Anyway, that look into carrying a bit of the underworld into something, you can't express it in language. You can't express it in, at least like like poetry is a different kind of language, but like you can't in normal language, you can't just describe it. You have to be evoking something, and it's a certain state, a certain mood that's below language, and that's what like the art is meant to. Real art conveys the glimpse of the underworld, whatever that underworld means.
Yeah, so I think that's useful. That's very important, because there's just, why do people get confused? Why do people just see themselves in 4? I mean, there are a lot of things, but I think that's one of them. Like most people see themselves as aesthetic, and it's not just like being into beauty.
It's also the attachment type thing of thinking that your type is making you great or not great. In other words, so like a lot of the people in the type 5 group are 99% 6s and 9s. It's sort of like what I was describing about 4. They're thinking that claiming 5 makes their intelligence, their thoughts, and so forth at the edge of having the capacity for absolute conceptual genius, right?
No, totally. Yeah. Thinking that having your fucking type be some whatever that gives you something.
Right.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, no, I mean, like, knowing I'm a 4, it just makes me hateful at myself for not being more artistic, you know? Like, not creating more, not being more prolific.
It's getting at that shame thing of, you know, what is 4 or 4-fix ashamed of? And it's this sense of just reality is just a pile of ordinariness. Like, you know, a lot of our roasts come from that. It's just bread people and Amazon fulfillment warehouses. It's just like we live in a hellscape that most of the things that we're doing are just ordinary, plain, and insubstantial, empty. And to be able to find something that's personal and speak to something hidden and special, you know, that's part of the 4 frustration or shame. Is like, my existence is mostly just fucking filling out documents or just doing things that don't matter. And sort of the denigration is coming from just that. Let's get to something real about us here. You know, like let's push from the fucking banal of existence.
And just that you can't be a walking aesthetic, beautiful thing, you know, at all times in every moment, which you'd like to be, right? You'd like to be a 100% moving, gorgeous painting or whatever it is, or something. You know what I mean?
I think certain fine ladies accomplish that.
Well, it's like the three fixtures can do that. They can embody something.
I'll see you after this podcast, baby.
No brain, just vibes, you know? Just aesthetic
vibes.
Here.
Just an aesthetic,
Because
my little lumpy
about
aesthetic.
Values.
Sleepy aesthetic over there.
You know what's hard about the forfix thing is that if you were to get to something special, to try to replicate it, because the 3 thing is like, you know, like H.R. Giger sort of creating those aliens for the movie Alien, and then they stopped having him work on those movies, and so other artists are just replicating it. So like the 3 thing is just take a form and just, you know, just make it the standard. Whereas the 4 thing, it feels like if you find some hidden special thing and you express it, you have to. It's like you have to go back into the well to find something again. Like it's not like say, well, I'm just gonna just pull from that same well and keep showing you the same special thing. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, it feels like 3 can actually assembly line something aesthetic and beautiful and hold beauty in a functional way. And the 4 thing is that it's so special and hidden that if once you reach something, well, it's not. You have to go find. That's the frustration of is like that's not special anymore. You know, it's. I have to go deeper into something else.
You feel like utility is destroying the thing or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I was thinking too that like because 4 is so specific and because it's so hyper personal, then once you find the like special thing, you actually can't leave it in any way possible, in any way for any reason. And 3 has the ability to like, with 3 wing 4 specifically has the ability to like find the special thing and like make some use out of it, but it does have to leave the thing for a little bit, you know? So that's kind of the difference that I see with the 3 and 4-4-3 space.
What do you mean when you're saying leave the thing?
Leave the like special thing, you know, like once you find the like precious gem of the world or whatever, I feel like 3 can like make it into a beautiful ring or something like that. But 4's like has to keep it, can't leave it.
Partly you mean leave sort of the emotional I don't know, just staying on the precious juiciness of the specialness. Is that kind of what you mean? Is that
it's almost like an attachment to that like special thing that it's found.
Yeah, like for example, like John, I'm sure there's some level of disgust at the thought of taking some of your paintings and just I don't know, selling them or mass producing them.
I mean, like everybody's always asking me why don't I show them anywhere or anything, and I'm just like, nah,
it's not for that.
Happen. If it happens, it happens. But I mean, but there's a way that I'm just like, oh, you know,
yeah. It's the 3 thing can take something personal and make it into a product or make it into something that can be consumable and people can recognize. And it feels like the 4 space, like you're saying, is that there's some. In order to keep it special, it has to remain inaccessible to the wider milieu. It can't. If it was readily accessible to everyone, it feels like a betrayal of self.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting too, and that speaks to the 4 being withdrawn. Right, it's out of view of public consumption. 3 is on display, and then 2 is given out as like a product.
Yeah, and it feels like whenever there's an attempt to productize or to hold into a certain category, it feels like the frustration 4 thing is like you need to look again. Like I see that with I think this conversation about 4 wing 5, 4 wing 3, and sort of like Imageyness, and I was reflecting on that, and I'm like for me as a gut type, like 4-5 is no less image. It's just a very different way of doing it. I was thinking about Bob Dylan and some of these other 4-5s where it's like people, he's so not playing the game or trying to reference or even react to any sort of the attachment milieu of people trying to figure out what the fuck he's doing, that there seems to be this impulse that whatever it is that you thought I was doing or you thought that you could understand or grasp, that's not it. Yeah. Like he constantly subverting whatever identity. Not to say that he was like reacting to like people trying to box him in. It's just like what I am is so unmysterious and untouchable. My reference is not even on this plane. It's just not available at all.
Partly probably referencing that one 60 Minutes interview where the interviewers with Bob Dylan, where he's basically saying, but everybody loved you, and you know what I mean? Like, don't you see, or take in these accolades, take in how much you were revered and thought of as a god or an important person, or just, and he just pushes it away just every time. He just is not having any of it. Nope. Yeah. You didn't describe me right. They didn't describe me right. They never get it right. It's
that's even 4-3 right there, because he's not even saying that, because he's just saying that the way that music is recognized, he's like, you know, they have a different top 10 every year. So you like, you know, you put me in number one as it's going to be a different person next year. So what does that even mean? Yeah, so like the 4-3 thing is like, oh, it's wrong because it's like pushing away from the music. The 4-5 thing is like the way that you're seeing
the whole system.
The way that you're seeing isn't real. Like your eyes aren't real. Your metrics aren't real. The whole frame. The framing isn't real.
Yeah, because 4-3 still has an ability to see things from outside of itself. It still knows what it looks like from an external lens.
Yes.
Whereas 4-5, like, really doesn't have that ability, and also doesn't have the interest to develop it, because that would take it away from its own subjectivity more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because there's a certain way that as a 4-5, I feel sometimes like too socially dumb to even react in certain ways against things, because it's like I don't even have the eyes outwardly to see to then determine, oh yeah, this is like, there's a certain naivete or whatever based on not having developed even, and it's social blind too, but it's like the outside camera looking back didn't get like installed.
It wasn't incorporated.
Yeah. So there's just sort of a dumbness about just like moving through things, because I'm not even, there's like the outer reference is so minimal.
Yeah, like it feels like this 5 rejection thing of, if you're taking away the 3 as a secondary influence, then it's like my reference point is this singular orientation insight that is completely like you dug deep to some something to orient that's completely has nothing to do with the attachment milieu. Like it's just so I don't know, it's just so unavailable and inaccessible. And so it feels like whenever people bring like a 3 influence reference point, like, oh, so what you're doing, is it the voice of the people, or is it protest songs or whatever? And it's like you can't even have a conversation with it, because it's like that's the 5 thing of like that's got nothing to do with whatever I've burrowed into.
It's like all the forms, all the accepted forms of what anything could be or could be categorized as are just sand running through your fingers.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I will like appreciate a 3-ish perspective on something, you know, but it's like I can't hold it. You know, I get kind of insecure with my clients that I'm not like doing anything valuable, you know, for them. Because I just don't know what, if I'm reflecting things and sharing things and whatever, but I just don't know if it's like, I don't know what's going on out there, you know. And then so I've asked occasionally, like, so is this helpful, or like, how would you describe what, like, you know, like I've been upfront, like I don't know how to like classify this or something, and they'll share it and it'll be like good or cool or something, but then I can't hold it. I can't like move, you know, I can't be like, this is what I offer, because I was trying to figure out for a while to be like, well, on my website, I need to get more precise language about like why would anybody talk to me, and I just can't do it.
I guess it's that thing with 4 and 5 being in the what 4 is doing in the heart space, 5 is doing in the head center. And so when you have a type that's got both in that wing, it's more in the dark. Like at least with 4-3, there is like coming up to at least make a distinction between that personal subjectivity and the sort of ordinariness of reality. And 4-5 is like both of your types, like your core and wing, are both in the dark of identity and orientation. And it feels like, how can you put a frame around something that can't be seen? Like you're trying to give form to something that feels completely unseen.
This is really dumb, but I can see my 4-5 versus y'all's 4-3 when we're ordering food. Because I know it's self-pres, I know there's other stuff going on there, but
Sure.
But like there's a way in which like you both in your different styles get very like, this is the good stuff.
Right.
You know, like this is like, you know, your flavor profile. You know, it's like
right.
there's a certain way that you're like, in like the image I have is like you're looking at all the flavors and possibilities and combinations at a restaurant or whatever like this, and you're sort of sweeping through and you're like, this
is the special stuff here. Here it
and
is.
yeah, this is special. And you guys do kind of have a way that you're like celebrate the finding the special thing.
Right.
You know, there's a certain, this is good. This is
the aristocratic scallops with butter sauce.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you're like, I'll have another order of that, or something like that. That is like a reinforcement of the special thing has been discovered, or you know, if it goes the opposite way, it's just like, I can't even do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas I'll be like, I like this thing, and then it just sort of like, it feels like it just stays in this space or something.
Yeah.
But you guys, like when you order, for some reason, that's the first thing that comes to mind. But there is this like just this.
I think this is very abstract, but I think of it as like the 4-wing 3 thing is like, I don't know, somehow expressing it with paisley purple curly cues or something that's like you know, it's just sort of dark florets or something.
Floret.
You know, just that made me think that the 4-wing 3 is expressing the ideal. It does feel more dramatic, and we see that in the aesthetic. It's operatic, and there's more drama in it. And it feels like 4-wing 5 is doing the thing that feels like you should do with frustration. Is it should be hidden. Like it should always be unseen. Like expressing it kind of puts you out there in a way that makes you vulnerable to having other people fuck with it. And so the 4-5 thing of just like, there's no part of my ideal that's above the surface. Like it's not accessible for us to even talk about. Like that's not how it's happening. It's always under the surface.
That's part of the association with excellence and height with 4-wing 3 is because you're doing the vulnerability of saying the thing, you know, the frustration-y specific thing that you want, but you've got to make it high and whatever, noble or whatever,
idealized too. With the 3 edition. Another way that I see the difference between the 4-wing 3 and the 4-wing 5 between the 3 of you is that David and Emeka, there is a way that you guys do know how people see you. You know, sometimes it's still arrested because you guys are social blind, but there is a way that you guys you do kind of know your image to other people, and I think that is that's because of the 3-wing. There's you still look like are annoyed by it, you know, or it's not good enough or whatever. Like there's still fussiness around it. I feel like John is like truly clueless a lot of the time. He's just not interested. And it's like he doesn't have the antenna to be able to pick up on like, oh, this is how I'm coming across, or like how people are holding me. But then also, there's a lack of interest in doing that because it's like double insulated. And another thing that I was thinking of too, and maybe we can save this for when we do the 4-wings episode. Another thing I was thinking of too is that because 4-wing 5 has a rejection piece, So it's a rejection wing on a value type.
Personal.
There is a way that like maybe 4 wing 5 is kind of more self-appointed in finding the thing that's valuable for like, I don't know, itself and externally or something like that.
Yeah, I guess it's getting at that rejection thing we were talking about of different versions of blankness in that, and rejection is doing the let me set the scene, the substrate or elements of whatever this is. And it feels like if you're doing that, then you're cutting off the communication with the above world. It's all self-contained identity construction. And so to the outside, it feels more nondescript because 4 wing 3 is like trying to express their distinctness in contrast to everything else. Like this, this is special. Whereas 4 wing 5 is not expressing that. The rejection thing is like, there's even the aesthetics of 4 wing 5 in a certain way is more blank, less colorful, more more monochrome than 4 wing 3, and so it's far less available and blank in a certain way.
One way I'd say it is the 3 is adding like musculature in the world that can move in the
that's
world.
Good. Yeah.
Right. Again, sort of as opposed to the image of 4 wing 5, the sand. Just the formlessness thing, where it's just sand is running through your fingers.
We've talked about almost a certain 9ness in 4 wing 5 because there's like
for sure.
Getting to like, I can feel it in myself, like as a visceral experience, like identity being very singular and specific and almost like bottoming out into like the absence or the void or something. Nothing. Yeah.
Right.
And, like what you said with like curly cues or something, David, like a purple, like, like, I mean, like, like Emeka, when you dress up, you
I was
have
gonna bring this up too. Yeah.
You kind of have a Prince like the frill or something look.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like it's
theatrical.
Really, yeah, it's like, I mean, even like the way between the way you and I dress, like I'm the image type.
Right.
But you have a bit more of like a flair to you than I do.
Flair, yeah.
Right.
Like I'm ornamented. I'm just like this is black on black and then a leather jacket.
Different shades of black.
Different shades of black, and you're like you have that like one like ripped up shirt and stuff.
Yeah.
You have all this kind of, you have a flair to you that's really interesting because you're so like there's not taking bullshit. And then princely, princely swirl. Yeah,
like I'm remembering the suit that you wore to the wedding
the
we went
Joker
to
suit.
a couple of years. Yeah, I mean it was just so stylized.
So great. I love that. I love that you wear those things. Yeah.
Yeah. The actual name of that tie was a pussy tie.
Right.
Great. Perfect.
I had to do it.
Which was deeply offensive to me. I bore with it.
I was thinking of like 2 in contrast to all of this because we've been talking about how 4 has frustration and it has all of the specificity, and the aesthetic sense comes from like sort of like the churning of your personal desire or whatever.
Yes.
And how there is, and I didn't say this earlier, John, when we were talking about this is language that came up afterward. Oh wait, maybe I did. But anyway, that there's like a, because 4 is so like self-involved, there's a lack of generosity that comes from it in a way that 2 on the opposite end, like that's the give and take between those 2 types. Like 2, because it's not self-focused, it has this ability to just like pump out all of this like if you think of politics has like basically no 4 in it, right?
Right.
It's like all 2. Because the 2 energy is the only energy. It like actually can't be self-interested if it's going to be taking care of other people.
Right.
And in order to take care of other people, you can't be too connected with your sense of repulsion, or else people are not going to get the service that they need.
No, yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, it makes sense that in order for the world to function, you're going to need a lot of 3 wing 2 energy out there, because if we were all 4 fixed, 3 wing 4 fixed in our own little, personal subjective corners, how functional would the world be?
We'd all be frenemies.
It's not encouraging each other energy. That 3-4 space.
Yeah, so I was thinking of that. I was thinking of like homeless shelters and,
Sure.
like nursing and stuff like that. It's probably largely
hardcore.
3, yeah.
Yeah, 2, 3-wing 2, that kind of stuff. And then even that thought had me understanding 4's line to 2 in a new way. Because if 4 has so much like personal vitriol and personal, like this is where my location is, that sucks, that sucks, that sucks. The stress point of that would be to go to something that kind of self-forgets itself, that kind of self-forgets in a way and moves to a dutiful place.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. I thought that was kind of interesting
Oh,
because in
super
certain,
interesting.
most of the 4s that are out there that we've like typed, they've been through some like insane shit, like crazy stuff, and have tolerated like actually abusive situations. So it kind of does make you wonder, like, how is a type that is so committed to its own self-interest able to tolerate something like that? And it would be because like the stress point pushes it into a place where it actually has to forget about those things for a while.
Yeah, that hit me hard when Alexander shared that. It was like,
oh wow,
fuck, yeah, no.
I guess that's the shadow.
Myself.
I guess that's the shadow point of that much self-interest and self-focus, is that it does have like, it becomes like an explosion of, let me care about you, this other person, like in a way that maybe feels less functional and it feels more immature, that you end up maybe overextending yourself to make up for it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like compensatory or something. Yeah.
Yes, yeah,
For sure.
Yeah.
That's something to think about.
Yeah, I
But
thought that was interesting too. And we could look at 4's line to 2 or 2's line to 4 also. Wait,
but I
yeah,
do
2's line
want
to
to
4.
yeah, I do want to come around back to this just so I can remember it, but that's some role of 4 for the collective and what we've been doing as a group of just bringing people into their own personal subjective hell. And I think I want to just remember that as sort of like, okay, that is a central piece to what we're doing or what I'm doing,
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, it's the reason why we're ostracized by the wider IEA world or whatever it is that we're somewhat just incidentally, insistent on pressing into the hellishness of the types, the hellishness of each other's specific, typology combination and all of that kind of stuff. Whereas, the wider Enneagram sort of functional community is about, supporting
growth,
functionality and basic,
yes.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Like the roast that we do, it's all about highlighting what sucks about all of these types.
I mean, yeah, it's like the difference between like a lot of mental health stuff is about managing your rage, shame, and fear.
Yeah.
Right.
But then to confront rage, shame, and fear directly is that's like what needs to happen for like inner transformation. And so there's a little bit of a, Emma, yesterday you were using like a term like punk spirituality or something.
Yes.
Like that. It's like there's a difference between mental health and just keeping things managed and then confronting this undergirding stuff that leads to a death and rebirth. And I feel like that's what we've been highlighting, the hells.
Yes.
And what it means to be in hell. And part of the negative feelings people get sometimes, I mean, not to absolve ourselves of all our sins or whatever, but like a lot of what people react to when they listen to our podcast get mad is because we're highlighting the limitations of the hell they're in. Like we're just like, oh yeah, it is, yeah, it's harder for this or that, or I'm absent this, or I'm blanking on that, or my relationship is empty because of this, or whatever.
Yeah, I guess it's making people feel the hell. Like, even just like
exactly.
Like episodes like the soul intercourse and why that got such a huge reaction. People get or even the roasts. It's like you're just like forcing people to see parts of themselves that are real, and because we're accurate, it's like we're actually getting into something that maybe you've been running away from your entire life, and to like experience it in a podcast is like you're gonna experience your own hell.
It's like the accuracy and the humor forces an actual saturation, an experiential saturation into sort
the
of
hell,
the negative, the hell.
Beautiful. That makes me
welcome to
feel
hell. See you in hell, everybody.
Makes me feel warm inside.
Yeah.
It's like, oh wow, my role in the world. I'm mirrored.
Keep us for more specific articulations of
Find your hell.
hellishness.
Yeah, that feels good. All right.
All right.
Don't come to me personally or anything.
No. This is not about me. I'm not extending any hands here. I'm helping you maybe from a distance, perhaps. But I'm really just scratching my own itch. You might benefit, though.
And on that note.
Yeah. I gotta use the bathroom, so.
Okay.
All right, yo.
All right.
It's a good pod.
Yeah, good one.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Later, yo.
All right,
Later.
bye.
Bye, guys.
Hell be with you.
I'll be with
I'll be
you.
with you.
Right.
Also with you.